Hello and welcome to another edition of Design Dispatches, where today we bring together a creative duo, Adam Smith and Marcus Lyall, who've worked together for 20 years as production designers for, among other things and other people, the Chemical Brothers, and including some of the most spectacularly staged performances in the last 2 decades anywhere on the planet. One of which will feature in the Design Museum's upcoming exhibition, soon to be opened, Electronic, from Kraftwerk to the Chemical Brothers. Adam Smith was trained as a film and television director, and Marcus Lyall studied graphic design and audio-visual studies at Central St Martin's, and is also an installation artist who had an exhibition earlier this year in London. Welcome, Marcus and Adam. How did your creative partnership begin? I read somewhere early 90s rave culture, but that's fairly broad. How did you actually get to start working together?
We were making bits of film and photographing things and met, I think when we were 16, wasn't it, Marcus? 16, 17? And Marcus was at Camberwell doing a foundation, and I was doing a film and photography course at Kingsway, and we were both kind of drawn to quite abstract work, I guess, and we were messing about with filming and taking photographs and
putting on parties as well. I mean, originally, I mean, we were sort of doing bits of DJing and putting on events from when we were teenagers, I guess, and started going, well, let's put some visuals in here, and literally just got some slide projectors and Super 8 projectors and started just sort of projecting anything we could find, really, and started working with the Mutoid Waste Company, doing things at some of their events. They had a place next to Camberwell School of Art, and then it was like, wow, we could make our own stuff, and kind of went from there, really, sort of building it up, learning from a few other people who had already started working a lot with 16mm cine projectors and doing things at some of the bigger raves, and we just kind of went from there.
Yeah, I seem to remember an early show. We borrowed Marcus's dad's whole collection of stained glass windows. He had a slide collection of stained glass windows. So that actually still features that idea still features in the Chemical Brothers show. So we haven't moved on much in 20 years.
but the technology certainly has. We're not using mail anymore. I mean, technology has moved hugely. It has the process of what technology allows had a direct impact on the sourcing and the way that you start to trigger ideas? Or is the notion, as you say, slightly disingenuously, of stained glass or whatever, that's still the driver? It's things that exist in the visual landscape that are your trigger or your starting point that helps you realise that?
Well, I think the starting point is always the music and what that makes us feel, and what that what that brings up in us, and so therefore what we want to express. And then technology has some of the same, it still has, visuals have to be kind of bold and impactful. There's what we've learned over the years, and we learned kind of early on, is that it needs to really make a statement. You can't, too much intricacy and detail doesn't translate in a massive festival setting. You need to really, or in a busy rave. So you need to make a kind of bold statement. But these days, we use a very sort of sophisticated LED screen, and we have lights that go behind the screen, and a lot of our work is involved in creating these animations out of the lights. So there's an interaction between the visuals and the lights. So a dancer on the screen might make a movement, and that has an effect on the light. Or one piece that we've got is these dancers that have seemingly holding torches, and they point these torches at the audience, and out comes a huge beam of light that goes onto the audience. So it's this three-dimensional effect that we're creating with visuals and with lights, and we've only been able to do that through through the advances in technology. We couldn't do that with a Kodak carousel and a 16mm projector and a strobe light in the old days.
And being able to sync it up as well. I mean, it's taken us years to get to the point where we can actually go, right, that turns off, that turns on, and it all happens instantaneously and actually really syncs up. That's it's a lot more challenging than it sounds. We've really been working on that a lot. So to get those, and not just syncing it in terms of time, but also to get a light to land in exactly the right position, and the video so that the two things are in the same place at the same time. Yeah, it's complicated.
Yeah, by the way, it's not more difficult than it sounds. It sounds difficult. I can totally see that. And I'm interested at the beginning then about a kind of symbiosis between the environments and the rave parties that you were creating that emanated from music, and then the work that you do subsequently in the way that the music feeds into that. I mean, you're creating environments in which music then has an impact, and at the same time your environments emanate from the impact of music. Is that still the way you're working, say, when you're working with the Chemical Brothers?
I think it's always about the music first. I mean, in the end, we are there to create something around the music, and it's the primal sense, really. It's kind of, that's the thing that gets to the emotional nub. So that's the thing around which everything has to pivot, and so I think but what we are trying to do is to lift it out of just being music, so that so as much as possible, what we're trying to do is make something where the visuals feel like they have to be there, that they're an absolutely integral part of the experience, and trying to sort of mesh with the music as much as we possibly can. So it's not acting as a counterpoint ever, it's always sort of acting as a point.
Well, it's interesting because I mean, I can't hear certain Chemical Brothers tracks now without seeing the images you created. And I wasn't even at the live gig, but I've seen the video projections, I've seen the digital content online, and it becomes incredibly strong or immersive in that sense. What about scale? I mean, you work together in studios. You're doing on the largest possible scales, Glastonbury festivals. You started smaller scale, museum context that you're working at the moment. Does that fundamentally alter the way you approach things, or do you, like an architect, fundamentally start small and can scale up? That's the basic process.
Well, it's very interesting working on the design museum piece, because we had kind of got used to this big festival scale, and it was, in a way, it was going back to what we were doing 20-25 years ago, where it's a much smaller space, so you kind of have to, we're almost turning things down and making it less it was too big for the space, so we had to adapt and think about that, which was a really, it's a fun challenge, but it is different
modality as well, isn't it? I mean, it's like when you do something for a concert, you've got to, it's big, but then you've got to think there's a lot of people who are standing a long way away. So for them, it's not actually that big, compared to your TV at home, for instance. So it's all about making it absolutely, as sort of impactful as it can be. And again, when you go into a gallery space, for instance, people have a totally different relationship with what's in front of them, because suddenly it's something that's really intimate. You're next to it, and so the sort of the tactile quality of the space becomes much more important. And obviously you haven't got the same, a really, really important part of the whole show is the audience, and the audience is very different. In if you're in a museum or a gallery setting, people are not they're not necessarily, their first instinct isn't to start sort of leaping around. They haven't been sort of primed for that as much as they would be in a festival or a concert. So it's about trying to make something that works for the space.
Although we did make a film called Don't Think that was a concert of the Chemical Brothers, but we did it in a kind of a different way to most concert films. And when that was in the cinema, people started dancing, even at like the BFI. In fact, in Los Angeles, someone actually damaged their hip, and the police had to be called because people wouldn't go back in the seats. It was a bit like Teddy Boys in the 50s, kind of, so it does check, and I think, I hope we do, in the design museum piece, I hope people do feel permitted to, if they want to dance, that they can dance, that it doesn't have to be, that museum spaces don't have to be somewhere that you're, that you feel you have to be somehow reverential or kind of, I can't think of the words. Do you know what I mean, Marcus? Can you say that better?
I'm not sure. Yeah, I know. It's definitely. I mean, obviously, look. If everyone who comes into our show does, it's a bit like karaoke. We don't want to force people into it. You know what I mean? But if they do get into it, that's a wonderful thing. It's about, just like at a concert, people have lots of different reactions, and we want all of those things to be okay. But certainly, it's definitely about, the thing about concerts that's great is it's permission to step outside how you normally are. There's permission to dance and to freak out and do those kind of things, and it's great to be able to create spaces where people can do that, could feel a bit freer.
There's a kind of boundary blurring that I like, and it all goes back to context. Whereas, when you behave in a certain way in a concert, it's natural. You're part of a crowd. When you behave in a certain way in a museum, reverential is one word, but it's a kind of intimacy that you talk about. But actually, in some ways, museums want people to behave in different ways than they normally do. And there's a sense I always feel with the quality of your work in a concert. Also, you may not admit this, or it may not be your aim, but there's a sense of presenting installation art in the broadest possible arena, as well as actually having an immersive experience that comes from and is in conversation with the music. Do you plead guilty to that, or is that just my overinterpretation? Because it is a form of installation art, isn't it?
I think guilty, but not necessarily, but purely by not with that intention in mind, purely with the intention of making an incredible show and expressing this amazing music, and also because of what Marcus's interests are and my interests are, and we were my mum found a badge for I don't know if you remember an exhibition called The Light Fantastic, which was lasers and holograms in the 70s at the Royal Academy.
Royal Academy, yeah, before my time, but I do remember it. Yeah,
it was, yeah. But it's things like, we've I guess Marcus and I have kind of grown up in that, being influenced by that from a pretty young age, Marcus, don't you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I mean, look, there's definitely, if you looked on my bookshelves, there's a lot of installation art books there. There's no question that, that has been an influence, and it is about sort of where, a lot of the references that we like using are definitely from a sort of fine art background.
And theatre as well, so it's not the usual sort of rave or concert visual inspiration, if there is a usual or rave, I think we come at it from a different thing. And also performance is a massive part of what, that's my day job is, as I'm a director, and that performance is a huge part of what I love, and what we love, and so that we fuse all these kind of different influences, and yeah,
I think that's been one of the things. I mean, it's probably the thing that's unique about the Chemical Brothers show, is that the fact that Tom and Ed have actually allowed us to really go for it in terms of the resource to be able to make these visuals is way beyond what most people do, and so the fact that we've been able to bring in you know, really top flight actors, performers, cinematographers, all the people that you use on you know, feature level production, and bring that into concert visuals. I mean, quite often concert visuals tends to be, just by dint of the, you know, the resources available, tends to get a bit motion graphicsy, a bit sort of reliant on those sort of things. And whereas we've been able to go, right, we're going to get this actor and we're going to spend sort of 2 weeks on the costume and sort of plot out a whole Japanese sci-fi action series, and, you know, do these kind of really very elaborate setups. It's a freedom that, you know, I mean, I've worked for quite a few different big acts, and no one gives you the freedom that that Tom and Ed do.
So with something like Got to Keep On, you know, design is collaborative, but it also requires a brief in which that freedom can be enacted. I mean, who came up with the idea of large figures, or you know, the balls? Was that, I mean, was that something you said? Was that a conversation that evolved from something you did before? I mean, did you start with a blank piece of paper? Do Ed and Tom say, you know, this is the music, let's talk together and see where it goes? How does the idea emerge out of what's effectively a four-way collaboration at the starting point between you and them, and then presumably all the technical collaborations that you need to realize it?
Well, there's a huge amount of trust, because, you know, I mean, I've been working with the Chemical Brothers since they were the Dust Brothers. So there's an incredible amount of trust, and there's this, as Marcus is saying, there's this beautiful freedom that we're given. So Tom will play us some music. I might go down there, or we might go down there and listen to it, and then we're free to come up with an idea. And you know, often, you know, sometimes I remember once we were talking about an idea to them, and Tom said, "Adam, I've no idea what you're talking about, but I love your enthusiasm for it, and you're so passionate about it. I bet it's pretty good. Let's do it." At which point Marcus' head fell down, because he realised how complicated and impossible it was. But the idea for Keep On was us, in Marcus's studio, listening to the music, and kind of came about with, we were sort of talking and riffing ideas, and then I started kind of strutting up and down the thing in a sort of Vogue-like camp way, and said, maybe this is a catwalk, you know, maybe this is a catwalk. This whole thing's a catwalk, and that's how it started. And then Marcus worked up the costumes, which were all designed in Cinema 4D by Marcus, and then we got a brilliant costume designer to realise them in practical terms. So there's this strange kind of relationship between computer graphics, but then being very real and very human. We worked with an amazing director who runs Gecko Theatre, who did all the choreography for us, Amit, but in terms of the process, we come up with an idea. We, you know, as soon as we said that catwalk thing, Ed and Tom were like, "Yep, that sounds great, get on with it." At that point, we didn't really have a sense of who these figures were. We explored lots of different avenues. And I'm not even sure if Ed and Tom saw the figures before we shot. I can't remember, Marcus. Can you?
I'm not sure they did. I think we saw, we may have sent them some sketches or something, but I mean, it's funny, those we were really sort of banging our heads against the wall trying to work those costumes out. And as ever, it kind of, you know, because where do you start? You sort of, you know, you've got the whole of everything to choose from. And then And of course, the shoot day gets closer and closer, and you have to make up your mind. And the costume person's going, well, and it was like, right, they're all pink. We'll do that. Okay, right. We love, we had a big thing about the sort of Bauhaus theatre. What's the name of it? Begins with T. Ballet, amazing costumes. The Triadic Ballet. I can't remember the name of the designer, but massively. We loved those.
Not Oscar Schlemmer, no.
Yes, Oscar Schlemmer, exactly.
Begins with T. Yeah, somehow I was on the same wavelength. Yeah.
and that idea of bringing geometry into it, and then literally it was like, okay, and sometimes, I mean, it literally was like, let's clang some shapes onto some figures and see what that looks like. Okay, that's interesting. So, and then we got Kate in, our costume designer, and worked out, well, you don't want to put a cube there or they won't be able to move their leg, and sort of, kind of worked it through to try and make things that people could move around in. I have to say, on the shoot, the costumes are really, really challenging for the most part.
Also, there was a whole character that got cut from that piece. There was the fashion designer that came at the end and threw flowers into the audience, and it just wasn't. And he was in a kind of pink suit, and then we made this sort of pink sequined face for him, and it just felt too real somehow, even though he had a pink sequin face. But it felt too, what we always find is when we get too close to reality, somehow it doesn't work for the show. We really want to take people on this journey, and every time we get too close to something that's real, that's in the real world, that isn't in the sort of abstracted world, it feels somehow doesn't feel as so it doesn't feel right.
I think it's nice to keep that that abstract world very self-contained, a bit like like a science fiction film. You don't want to sort of you don't want to break the rules. You want to sort of go, okay, the Keep On world looks like this, and it's got these figures in it, and it doesn't have other things in it. And for that moment, for that 5 minutes, that's the world you're in. And it's and as Adam said earlier, I think it's with concerts, you're constantly battling distraction from everywhere, from the person who's sort of stepped on your foot in front of you, to the burger van that's on the left, to all sorts of things that are happening. And so what we find we need to do is to keep the message incredibly bold and simple, so that people can sort of just engage with it, and then after 5 minutes, it's gone, and then on comes the next thing. And so it's like a series of scenes in a play.
How much is your design process in this particular area based on human observation? You put this amazing spectacle in play, you create this abstracted world, this hyper real world. Do you look closely at how audiences respond over and over again, and that helps your evolving language of how you might approach the next issue, or is it always starting with the blank sheet of paper and the next piece of music?
It's interesting because it is usually a blank piece of paper, but there are things that you'll kind of know. Sadly, it's when everyone pulls their phone out that you're like, oh, and some of the visuals in the show get a roar from the crowd. And in fact, there's a visual for which features there's a photo of it in the Electronic Museum exhibition of a character that we made for a song called Mad as Hell, who puts his fingers out, and light beams fire out of his fingers. And that sample was only in the live set once, and Tom and Ed saw this visual and just went, oh my God, we've got to put that in again. So they changed the song to have that visual coming back, because they know as well what makes a great show moment. But I think the danger is with, and that's something that we're conscious of, and we've learned, and we keep learning on the way. The danger is to rest too much on your, oh, that works, you know, let's do more of that. And so we push you. What's great about working in a part, you know, usually we're working on our own, but what's great about working in a partnership with someone you've known since you were 16 is there's a candor and a straightforwardness of like, no, that's too easy. We push each other, you know, we challenge each other, and that, so that we don't rest on our laurels, you know, we don't go, oh, well, that works, so let's do that again. Although, you know,
it's like the tunnel, it's interesting. It's kind of like, quite often, I mean, we know that if you've got a great character or a great set of characters on the screen, we know that works. But it's kind of like, if you just keep doing that, then it's like, you know, as somebody once described it, like, you know, if you keep going 100 miles an hour, then it stops feeling fast. You know, you've got to kind of change it up at some point. So, you know, in the last tour, there was a lot of sort of character-based stuff, and then we did a piece that was just going down this kind of abstract tunnel and making the light sort of react to the tunnel, so it all kind of moved as one.
It's like a three-dimensional tunnel, you know. So as you go down the tunnel, the lights come out, and you travel through. The audience is actually in this tunnel rather than just watching it on the screen.
And so it's like, that's like as soon as you sort of change the modality of it, that's really powerful as well. So so that you sort of, people have settled into, this is okay, it's this, and then you go wallop, and that's what we're trying to do really, is to and it's very much the same as you would do a, you know, a theatre performance or a film. You know, you have an action sequence, then you have a love scene. You know, it's you're trying to build a roller coaster. So you're going up and you reach this climax, and then, oh, we've got this drop. And it's exactly the same way that the music works, that you can't just keep going at 100 miles an hour. You have to sort of get to a point and then drop it again. And I think it's, you know, it's very much the essence of 90s raves, in fact, was that idea of having these very kind of long crescendos, rather than it being everything happening in sort of 2 or 3 minutes, is building things up over really quite a long time, and then having these really kind of big, significant changes in pace.
It's clear that the future for live performance is tough at the moment, and it's a longer period of toughness than even for, you know, museums, and we're looking at a fairly bleak situation. And I don't want you to have to sort of, you know, answer existential questions about the future of performance over the next 2 or 3 years, but I am really struck talking to you both about the physicality and the communality of the experiences that you create. And in some ways, that's what museums do too. You know, we want to bring together people to share experiences. There's a communality. But I wonder whether you think in the short term that the technology and processes that you develop have the potential, using other technologies, AI or digital technology or personal computers and so on, whether the future will be, for the short term, doing the kind of work that you do, but it's something that is downloadable for a one-on-one experience, or is that just admitting defeat?
I don't think it is. It's just a different delivery, isn't it? It's got the potentially got the advantage of, we've started putting some of our visuals into VR already, things where we've used motion capture to create the visuals in the first place. And for instance, we've put the Akram Khan's performance from Galvanize into VR, and it's incredibly powerful, because you suddenly sort of, instead of seeing this figure, he's next to you. He's moving around you, and having that kind of experience is, you know, it's a totally different thing. But it's not a concert experience. It's a different beast. And I think the challenge for us is to suddenly, as soon as we started working on something in VR, it was kind of like, okay, right, we've got a lot to learn here. It's just such a different feel, and so definitely something very powerful there. we've got to kind of learn how to make it work.
I just wanted to say, Tim, just wanted to thank the Design Museum for and your comment earlier about acknowledging it as an installation, the show as an installation piece, and for the Design Museum really kind of believing in the show and making our room happen, which we're really grateful for, as are the band, because we're very interested in doing, in taking it to different places, into taking into different spaces, and museums, and being one of those places.
Well, the essence of design is collaboration. The essence of your practice is collaboration. And I think museums like the Design Museum have to collaborate, and actually shifting context and the way that we work with different kinds of design, it holds the key to our future, as well as it seems for the future of even production designers like you. So I'm delighted that we've been able to offer that context. I'm also very, very excited by seeing how the public engage, even at social distance, to see how they engage with those kind of installations. So I think it's a journey or experiment that we'll keep on together. I think there's much more to be done in this field. So I thank you both.
Thanks, Tim. Really good speaking to you.
Cheers. Thanks, guys. See you down at the museum at some stage.